Hey, thanks again for joining me, Frank Figliuzzi, on Need to Know for Lincoln Square and our very second episode on what has been a well-received thus far entree into this platform. So I am excited about our guest this week because he is someone who's not just in public service, but someone I've been keyed in on and following for a very long time. And you know how you sometimes feel like, hey, I'm in sync with this guy or gal. We share similar passions. That's the case with United States Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. And the people of Rhode Island are getting their money's worth with Senator Whitehouse, who seems to work 24/7 at the job. We're going to talk about two things I know that all of you are passionate about, and that's Epstein, Russia, Trump. I say that as one word, by the way. And then secondly, many of you, and get the blood pressure medication out, because we're going to talk about the confirmation process of Justice Kavanaugh, but more importantly, how we must change the manner in which the FBI conducts reinvestigations. I know you're going to want to hear this, and that's why we're going to go right now to our guest, Senator Whitehouse. Senator, thanks for joining.
Good to be with you, Frank.
Yeah, I'm thrilled about it, and thanks to your staff for making this happen as well. Look, I'm not going to go into a long bio or resume here, but man, you have been a consummate public servant, serving as State Attorney General of Rhode Island, the U.S. Attorney from Rhode Island, and now, of course, a senator that is really raising questions that I think the nation is asking. And look, you went viral. I don't know if you ever thought, boy, at my age, and boy, we're both getting a little up there. You went viral just 2 weeks ago with 5.5 million views on YouTube for a speech you gave on the floor of the Senate. And that's what stopped me in my tracks. So let's talk about a triangle. And boy, this is not a love triangle, although, you know what, it could be. Let's talk about the triangle of Trump, Epstein, and Putin, and what brought you to craft and deliver that speech that's now gone viral.
Well, the first thing to say about it is something that you would recognize extremely well as an experienced FBI leader with decades of experience, and that is that when you're embarked on an investigation, it's important to frame it correctly. If the U.S. attorney or the attorney general or the special agent in charge doesn't have a clear comprehension of what the target looks like, what the setup is that they're looking into, then the investigation is not going to be successful. And so what this speech was an effort to reset the debate on Jeffrey Epstein and the debate on Trump, Russia, to connect the third piece in the triangle, which is that Epstein had innumerable links to Russia that have not been adequately explored, and that they overlap with Trump's links in various ways. So the investigative plan going into this should be not Trump, Russia, and Trump, Epstein, but as you said at the beginning, Trump, Russia, Epstein. It's one triangle. And there are lots of people out there like you who are podcasters and reporters and researchers and do good work. And I felt that the issue had kind of gotten into a rut and was no longer really addressing the facts as we knew them. And this speech, I think, went that viral because people understood, oh yeah, we were in kind of a rut. And this actually is useful information. And we should do a second look into what Trump, Russia, Epstein looks like.
Yeah, that was a much needed reframing, or at least reminder of what we really should be looking at. And every time, I'm an FBI nerd, so every time I see the file numbers on these 3 million documents, the file number I see that jumps out at me is, of course, child sexual exploitation. I know that by heart. I used to supervise a squad that did that. But what we don't see, Senator, and maybe it's in the 50% of the files that still haven't been released, is any national security classification. We don't see that file number. We don't see the Russia file number. And that if nothing else, your speech served to remind us of what Trump constantly has put down, in many ways successfully, which is the Russia hoax. And you even mentioned in your speech that when asked by someone about Epstein, the first response he had was not that it's a hoax, but rather that it's a Russia hoax. So he, in his mind, don't listen to you and me. In his mind, he associates Epstein with Russia.
Yeah. And of course, we know that Epstein traveled to Russia. We know that many of his financial transactions, including the ones that raised suspicious activity reports, were with Russia. We know that many of the girls that he trafficked were from Russia. We know that some of his early benefactors were notorious Russian agents like Ghislaine Maxwell's father. So there's this deep, long thread of Epstein and Russia that really helps, I think, connect the three legs of the triangle together.
Yeah, I want to get into that. Even the documents themselves help point to that triangle. Let's play a clip briefly of you reminding us that Epstein actually bragged about providing Russia with insights on Trump. If we can play that clip, please.
Epstein claimed to have given at least some insight on Trump to the Russians. Epstein met on many occasions with Vitaly Churkin, Russia's representative to the United Nations from 2006 until Churkin's death.
Yeah. This is not, again, don't take our word for it. Let's look at what the DOJ's documents are telling us, what FBI documents are telling us. You talked about wire transfers to Russian banks. I've got at least $1 billion in wire transfers to a sanctioned Russia bank.
Yeah. Two of the well-known Russian banks were directly involved. And it was a strange enough thing that when the bank suspicious activity reports that Treasury requires for certain types of transactions were laid out, the two hooks that made these suspicious activity reports, one was it looked like there was danger of child sex trafficking involved.
Right.
And the other was it looked like there was danger of Russian influence and interference involved. So even in the suspicious activity report's own designations, they're connecting Epstein with Russia and with child sex trafficking.
Yeah, those are career financial experts at banking institutions. Those are not politicians or anybody that's biased. They're just saying the algorithm is telling us this is a big problem for vis-a-vis Russia, vis-a-vis possible child sex trafficking.
And one of the things that should be driving people crazy is that this MAGA crew that came into the Department of Justice were making all this noise about how they were going to get to the bottom of the Epstein files. They were going to expose Epstein. They were going to open up the scandal and all that. They have not done one step to investigate these suspicious activity reports, even after Chairman Wyden brought them to the surface through his Finance Committee investigation. You would think that when it's called suspicious activity reports, even a genius like Kash Patel could figure out that there might be, suspicious activity involved and do some investigating. But no, that's too much for the MAGA crew because they know where it leads.
Well, but let's talk about that, because you said openly what I am now saying. And I'm people who know me know I'm very careful before slapping salacious labels on things. But months ago I came out and said, look, this is a cover up. This is a cover up. The question I have, Senator, is what are we covering up? What are they covering? So in other words, you led off with this. Yeah. I talked about the file number classification. Yeah, it's pedophilia, it's child sex trafficking. But if that's, and that's bad enough, please don't get me wrong. But if that's it, get the names out. And yes, if Trump's involved, then yes, we should see that. But this goes back, Senator, to an old FBI office of mine. I was in the number 2 position at FBI Miami. Now I left, thank God, right before the case was opened on Epstein in Palm Beach. But where are the whistleblowing FBI agents, the whistleblowing AUSAs who saw their case crumble? And in my experience, the thing that keeps FBI, good, solid FBI agents from coming out and screaming cover up would be, well, there's classifications here. There's national security issues here. So my question to you is, what is your experience, your knowledge, and your gut tell you what is being covered up here?
Yeah, well, 3 quick points. The U.S. attorney who went so easy on Epstein in Florida in the first case has said that one of the reasons was that there was a national security angle to this. It was way above his pay grade. So that flags the national security issue. With respect to the cover-up, which is perhaps the most botched cover-up in history, as well as being a cover-up, they're very narrow specifics. Like, for instance, there are 4 302s. You know what a 302 is better than anybody. Investigative, interview summaries that FBI agents write down after the fact. 4 of the same witness. Of those 4, 3 mentioned Donald Trump and contained accusations that he had sexually and physically assaulted the witness when she was a young teenager, about 14 years old. Of those 4, the only one that didn't mention Trump got released in the ordinary course. The other 3 disappeared based on analysis that they now say was mistaken, that they were somehow duplicative of something. Of course, they were not. So now those are all up, but there's another, I want to say 37 pages of documents. And you as an FBI agent will know that during an interview, the FBI agents take notes. And at the end of the interview and after talking to each other, and then they sit down and then they fill out the proper 302. There's every reason to believe that the missing pages are the actual notes taken by the FBI agents in the presence of this witness, who, by the way, was a witness so credible that last interview was one in which they asked her to come back. Don't be frightened. Come. We need to hear more from you. Do come back. And so there's that. Why on earth did it just happen that the 3 that mentioned Trump were the ones that were wrongly withheld? And where are the FBI agent notes? Is that the other 37 pages? Those still have not been disclosed. So that's a narrow rifle shot right into a direct accusation at Trump. The broader thing is this question of, what if it really is Trump and Russia and Epstein all linked together? That opens it up a lot. And if that's the case, I think there's a ton of reasons why the MAGA Trump Department of Justice would want to cover up that whole notion.
Yeah, if anybody wants, first of all, I encourage everybody to read the transcript of the senator's speech and/or check it out on YouTube. But for those who want a summary, the senator was kind enough to give us a kind of David Letterman top 10 list as to why we need answers on Epstein, Trump, and Russia. And he lays out 10 connections that are critical here. Talk about, of the top 10, what are the biggest ones? I mean, you focus initially on, for example, Trump's lack of care about what's happening in Ukraine. And you want to summarize some of those reasons?
Yeah, that's the worst of it. I think many people, Republicans and Democrats alike in the Senate, see that Ukraine's resistance to Putin's savage and unlawful and unjustified attack and his multiple war crimes is something to which the rest of the civilized world should be responding, should be sending help. Trump uniquely is taking the side of Putin. Also uniquely, he engages nonstop in dominance displays. In every meeting, he exhibits dominance. In every public relationship, he tries to show that he is the dominant one in the relationship. With one person and one person only, Trump is the submissive. And that one person is Vladimir Putin, which raises the question, why is he behaving so out of character? Why is he making these decisions that are so un-American in terms of leadership of the free world? Why is he seemingly so beholden to Putin? what does Putin have on him? And if that's what leads you back into the Epstein triangle, then this whole Epstein thing isn't just a question of salacious information. It's a question of a foreign power having compromat on the US president and being able to direct the activities of the United States of America through a compromised president. That is a really big deal. I don't know that anything like that has ever happened in our country before.
No, I'm a student. Obviously, I was the head of counterintelligence for the Bureau. I'm a student of the history of intelligence and the governments. And it's unprecedented. And look, let's add to that now. Maybe it's a top 11 list now. There's evidence that Russia is assisting Iran in targeting U.S. Interests, and the president and his spokesperson, when asked about this, absolutely dismiss it, which is disgraceful.
Yeah, no, we should take the Russians at their word. Nobody in their right mind takes the Russians at their word.
Yeah, precisely. And then, look, near and dear to my heart is what the FBI is not doing, and DOJ is not doing these days under this administration. And you mentioned it in your top 10 list. Number 8 is Pam Bondi taking office and announcing that she's dismantling programs that go after kleptocracy, oligarchs, Foreign Corrupt Practices Acts, Foreign Influence Task Forces, the National Crypto Criminal Center, all dismantled under Pam Bondi. What say you about the environment we're in right now that Trump's created with regard to Russia?
Well, there are two elements to this. One, Attorney General Bondi has basically turned off the burglar alarms that protect our national security from improper, illicit foreign influence. So that opens the door to more Russian influence of the kind that they've already shown in the last 2 elections that Trump won. They actually tried in the election that Biden won, but it didn't succeed. So there's that. And then if you sort of take back a step and look at where we are in the world, I very strongly believe that there's a clash of civilizations in the world right now, and it's rule of law versus crookedness, criminality, kleptocracy, autocracy, all of that. And what this does, what Trump's decisions do, is to help the enemy, the adversary, the kleptocrats, autocrats, and international criminals who conspire and work against the United States in that battle. He is giving aid and comfort to our sort of institutional adversaries by shutting down the tools that we use to make their lives miserable and to expose their crooked transactions.
Yeah. My 25 years in the Bureau concentrated heavily on Russian counterintel. And I can tell you they would have paid billions of dollars. The Russian government would have paid billions of dollars to create the environment we're in right now, where they essentially own an American president, whether he even realizes it or not. I don't. But he's done it for them at very low cost. Where do we go from here on this topic? Where does the Senate go? Where do our lawmakers go? You've talked about Comer and his subcommittee, and they're not. Look, I could give Comer a list right now of people that absolutely need to get subpoenaed, and it would include FBI officials. It would include assistant U.S. attorneys. Do we expect anything out of that committee?
I think they've kind of stepped back from being very aggressive on this. Obviously, it was terrific that they got the Epstein Files law passed and got this flood of information out. But I don't know how much we can rely on them for more at this point. But there is this whole world of people who do research and who do investigative journalism who can continue to look into it. And if there is as much to look into as the triangle theory suggests, then there's a lot more to go. And sometimes it's people who are just doing it on their own. This guy Sollenberger, who was the guy who kind of blew the whistle on the Trump 302s, he just dug in and figured that out on his own. It was really impressive, single-handed investigative research.
Yeah, I was, as soon as I saw him publish on that, I grabbed him. This show was the first time he appeared after publishing his findings, and I'm glad I grabbed him on that. Before we segue into our second topic, I want to just give our viewers this thought that comes right out of your documentation. The head of the KGB signed a secret document months before Ghislaine Maxwell's father died. And by the way, his death, in fact, is strange. He died.
Still mysterious.
He died at sea. That KGB official signed document showed Maxwell was an intelligence asset for the Soviet Union. A British government document says Maxwell, quote, almost certainly was financed by Russia, end quote. We're not making this.
Accompanied Epstein on his trip to Russia.
Indeed. And let's not even get into the numerous Russian girls and women that were swapped around the powerful elite here, and on airplanes, on Jeff's Epstein's airplane.
Yep.
So again, we're not making this stuff up.
We're not making this stuff up.
No. I want to go to another topic that I've written about. I know you have. You've certainly spoken about it. And that is dating back. And again, sorry, viewers, for bringing up this very painful pressure point. But the confirmation of Justice Kavanaugh and the angst everyone felt and still does, the gift that keeps on giving, as they say, is why the allegations, numerous and seemingly credible, against Kavanaugh from women and others, by the way, and even men, were some of them backed that up, were not only disqualifying, but were not entirely fleshed out in the FBI reinvestigation. And I want to set the stage here, because I'm that administrative FBI nerd. The FBI, in everything else the FBI does, folks, the client is the American people. They work for the American people. This one area, background investigations and reinvestigations, is the exception to the rule. And that's because the White House is the client. The White House is making the request. And this is particularly true, folks, when there's what's called a supplemental or a reinvestigation. That means that the nominee, as is often the case and was the case with Kavanaugh, has already served the government. He's already been through a full background investigation. So now they just need to update it. And believe it or not, the White House gets to dictate the constraints and parameters of that update or supplemental. Are we on the same sheet of music so far, Senator?
Yep, we sure are. The trail of this is that Brett Kavanaugh went through his original background investigation, and that concluded. And then Dr. Blasey Ford made her very credible accusations, echoed by other women with similar credible accusations, dating to his youth, high school and college years, and his engagement in inappropriate sexual, activity of various kinds. And so they had to reinvestigate, they had to go back and open that investigation. And what Chris Wray assured everyone is, don't worry, we're going to do this by the book. We're going to follow all the regulations and rules, and you can be confident in the outcome of the FBI's investigation. What he omitted, what he failed to tell the public, is that with respect to a supplemental background investigation, there is no book. There are no rules. There are no regulations. There's quite a lot of procedure. The FBI very well. The FBI lives by procedure. There's a lot of procedure around an original background investigation. But once it's a supplemental, it's open season, and they respond only to the White House. And one of the results here was that they set up a fake tip line. They announced that there was a tip line for tips to come in about further Kavanaugh misbehavior or corroboration of Kavanaugh misbehavior, and they investigated 0 of those tips, not one. If it came in and related to Kavanaugh, they basically put it in a bucket and shipped that bucket over to the White House counsel's office, where the president's political folks out defending the Kavanaugh nomination made the decision about what to do with those tips. Right. And of course, what they decided to do with those tips was to dump them, shred them, ignore them, whatever.
It's the proverbial fox guarding the hen house when it comes to these reinvestigations. And I know we have limited time, but I want to get your response to this kind of suggestion. Clearly, things need to change with regard to reinvestigations and who dictates them and who doesn't and who should. But what would be wrong with getting the Senate, who ultimately the Senate committee that's going to govern that nomination and confirmation process, right? And get them, their chair and minority, co-chair or leader, to get a process and say, look, these are the questions we want answered in this reinvestigation, and somehow take that away from the White House. Am I naive that would ever happen?
No, I think that could happen. And because the FBI already has very robust procedures around the original background investigation and what it's required to look at and how far you're required to go. You don't just abandon a concern halfway investigated, and you got to run it down until you really know it or the person withdraws. So there's this whole panoply of procedure, protocol, regulation, standard practice at the FBI. There's no reason that couldn't be extended to a supplemental background investigation. I think it does the FBI a lot of harm.
Right.
When you have an FBI director tell the American people, don't worry, we've got this. You can count on us. We've got a tip line, and we're going to follow all of our customary rules and procedures. And then you find out after the fact that the tip line was a fake because there were no customary rules and procedures to follow. So all they did was dump the tips over at the White House counsel office, and none were ever investigated, not one.
Well, Senator, sign me up for any counseling or consulting that needs to get done on how to fix FBI reinvestigations. I've conducted them as a young street agent. I've supervised them as a leader. I know how to get this fixed. I don't know how to execute it on the Hill, but I'm there for you. Hey, thank you for all the work you do. You're doing God's work. Keep asking the hard questions, presenting the evidence, and we'll let you go. But
thank you, Frank, also, and thank you for your years of service to the FBI, which is an organization I've been extremely proud to work with in my U.S. attorney days and in my attorney general days.
Yeah, and rest in peace, Bob Mueller, my former boss. Take care, and God's graces. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. All right, folks, that was Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, and boy, could we go a whole hour if we had it with the good senator. Yeah, I hope you could see my passion with regard to the FBI background investigations and reinvestigations. If there's one area of disagreement, and it's slight, we might have between myself and the senator, is this. Chris Wray has responded to the allegation that the tip line that was set up was somehow a ruse or fake by essentially saying, and I'm paraphrasing the director's response, was, look, we needed a repository. We knew the public needed to get involved. This is kind of a weird thing for a reinvestigation, soliciting the public's input. But they do it all the time on crimes, right? They're doing it right now on the Nancy Guthrie case. So they go, well, what part of the FBI does that? Solicit public calls. Well, it's that crime tip line, right? So he said, let's do it that way. They collected all of them. What we then did was, and again, this is the practice and protocol that's in writing at the Bureau. He took all of that and handed it to the White House. So yes, it is the fox guarding the hen house, but that is the protocol. And, the FBI, if nothing else, is certainly a bunch of rule followers, and that's what we pay them to do. But this needs to change. The White House can't constrain the reinvestigation. And as I said, I think it needs to go back to the Senate and the committee in a bipartisan fashion where they go, we want these questions answered. Okay. Now, I'm a cynic. I'm a professional cynic. Will the White House ever give up that power? I don't care what party is in control in the White House, but think about this. Whether it's a Democrat president or a Republican, would they say, right? Because presidents throughout history have had this opportunity. I've researched this from both parties to say, you know what, this is weird. When I nominate somebody, I shouldn't get to dictate the reinvestigation that happens with a nominee. And think about it. Lots of nominees have already served and had full investigations. Unless, of course, you're talking about the Trump administration where no one seems to have any experience, but I digress. So would any president of any party say, I'm willing to entirely give up that first look at investigative results of my nominee? I'll give that up to the politicians in the Senate. I don't think they will. And that's why we still don't see changes to how the FBI does reinvestigations. But look, if you think that's an issue, we're far worse than that right now, my friends. We're in a place now where they bypassed the background process. We've had multiple media platforms reporting that they just did away with polygraphs and with backgrounds for some people. Do you think Tulsi Gabbard would pass a background investigation for a top secret clearance? No. So if you think Kavanaugh was bad, at least they did an investigation of sorts. We've got a situation now where none are happening in some cases. So my thoughts there. Look, and I'm going to talk later on this week about the death of my former boss, Robert Mueller. May he rest in peace. If you haven't seen it already, there's a column that came out on Monday morning that I'd urge you to check out at Lincoln Square or on my Substack. And I give you my personal experience with Mueller. The guy, I don't know if we'll ever see another public servant like this. I'll be very candid with you. And I know this, if you're asking, Frank, is this more than just a memoriam? Do you go into the special counsel investigation led by Mueller on the Russia interference? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I won't do the spoiler alert, but when I say we won't have another public servant like this, I mean not only the guy's heroism in battle and 2 Bronze Stars with valor and 4 degrees and assistant attorney general, U.S. attorney, homicide prosecutor, guy who was born into privilege and chose not to live like that. He thought it was a privilege to serve the public. Only FBI director asked to extend. First of all, by the way, he was the only FBI director to serve his 10-year term after the 10-year term was put in place. He's the only one that not only finished 10 years, but then was asked by Obama, a president from a different party that appointed him. He was appointed by George Bush. Obama couldn't find anybody to do as good a job post 9/11 as Mueller. He asked Mueller, who, by the way, was absolutely ready to retire. I was in the meeting when he said, I'm going. And then I was in the meeting a few days later when he said that President Obama asked him to serve 2 more years. And he was unanimously affirmed by the Senate, not only his first time as director, but the extension was unanimous in the Senate. So when I say we're not going to find another guy or gal like this, is it technically possible we will have somebody with that resume? It's technically possible. But here's something sad about what I mean when we're never going to find a guy like this again. We've learned a lesson from Mueller. And the lesson is that the dutiful Marine lieutenant who served his country for almost 50 years, folks, in different capacities, and handed in his last assignment methodically, thoroughly done, believed that his superior officer, Bill Barr, was going to do the right thing, believed that the institution called the Justice Department that Mueller served in was going to do the right thing. Are we ever going to have someone who wholeheartedly accepts that notion again? And should we have that again? Because sometimes that dutiful lieutenant needs to understand that his superior officer is not superior and may even be the adversary. I'm going to close out with that. Thank you for joining me and my special guest, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. I'll see you next week on Need to Know.